Welcome, everyone, to the history and evolution of acupuncture research from the first millennium to the present in 18 slides. This work is based on the Society of Acupuncture Research's special interest group on education, for which I was the chair, and specifically the acupuncture research outline that we developed. Case reports were the first forms of research, and in fact, they still are a valuable form of research to this day. Our most respected Chinese medical doctors were researchers. They went from village to village, treating people, and then writing up what was successful and what was not. Case reports were the primary way of disseminating information and improving the practice of Chinese medicine in ancient times. Jumping to the 1800s in the Western world, the first case report in English was published in 1826 in the North American Surgery Journal. And it was a case report that illustrated the effect of acupuncture to help heal after surgery. The doctor who wrote it said, "My impression is that acupuncturation possesses a remarkable power in removing and mitigating pain." President Nixon's China visit in 1971 was historic in many ways, but one of the ways was that reporter James Reston got appendicitis on that trip and was operated on using acupuncture anesthesia. He was so impressed with it that he wrote about his experiences in the New York Times, and the U.S. was introduced to acupuncture through that article. Here, President Nixon is shown shaking hands with Chinese Premier Zhou Enlai. And on the same trip, Dr. Chak, President Nixon's personal physician, saw enough about acupuncture to convince him the West must get to know it. After that historic 1971 visit, scientists' interest were piqued in acupuncture research, and very important studies in the 70s and 80s uncovered the basic mechanisms of acupuncture through a series of very important basic science studies. For example, in 1973 and in 1978, procaine and naloxone, two drugs that block the opioid receptors in the body, were found to also block acupuncture analgesia. This was repeated in many studies since then, and really is proof of that hypothalamic pituitary axis that is so important in acupuncture analgesia. In 1977, trigger points and acupuncture points were found to be the same, really. And in 1987, Dr. J.S. Han in China uncovered the neurochemical basis of pain relief. We'll be exploring all of these in much greater detail in our module on the basic science of acupuncture. Dr. Bruce Pomerantz, a seminal acupuncture researcher active during this time, wrote in his foreword to the book, The Scientific Basis of Clinical Acupuncture, 20 years of research in my lab, coupled with over 100 papers from the Western scientific literature, led to a compelling hypothesis. Acupuncture analgesia is initiated by the stimulation of small diameter nerves and muscles, which send impulses to the spinal cord. Then, three neural centers, the spinal cord, midbrain, and pituitary, are activated to release transmitter chemicals, including endorphins and monoamines, which block pain messages. And this diagram really illustrates those pathways. In another seminal paper published by Vickers et al. In 1996, they did a systematic review of acupuncture anti-emesis trials. That means anti-vomiting. And they showed in one of the first systematic reviews that acupuncture can indeed have specific effects on health. In this one trial, they looked at 33 controlled trials that used pericardium 6 to treat nausea and or vomiting associated with chemotherapy, pregnancy, or surgery. And 27 out of the 29 trials, acupuncture was statistically superior to controls. 4 of the trials did not show benefit. And then a secondary analysis using the data from 2,000 patients also showed that acupuncture, if at P6, effectively reduced vomiting. So those were very, very important studies. And then in 1997, the National Institutes of Health held a very important conference on developments in acupuncture, and they gave guarded endorsement of acupuncture while concluding that overall evidence base of randomized controlled trials was weak. But they nevertheless encouraged further research, which in fact has taken place. This was a very important consensus conference. In the analysis of the Web of Science database from 1988 to 2015, this paper reported on 7,450 studies on acupuncture published during that time, 28% from China, 22% from the United States, and 9.5% from South Korea. And you can see the other countries listed there. The problem, of course, is at that point, many of these studies were not of high quality. In order to improve the quality of acupuncture research, the Society of Acupuncture Research, or SAR, was started in the 1990s, and their mission statement is to advance patient care, to promote scientific evaluation into acupuncture and allied therapies, as well as dissemination and implementation of these findings. They're a very important international organization. They've written 3 very important white papers that explore major topics in acupuncture research from a wide perspective, and we will be discussing those papers, especially the challenges in acupuncture research, in the next module. In 2007, SAR hosted an international conference to mark the 10th anniversary of the NIH Consensus Conference. More than 300 acupuncture researchers, practitioners, students, funding agencies, and personnel and health policy analysts from 20 countries attended this meeting held at the University of Maryland School of Medicine. This paper, The Status and Future of Acupuncture Mechanism Research, summarizes the lectures in these very, very important areas, including the assessment of acupuncture points and meridians, the neural mechanisms of cardiovascular regulation by acupuncture, mechanisms for electroacu applied to persistent inflammation and pain, basic and transitional research on acupuncture and gynecology. So very important paper. Of course, since the time that this was published, a lot of new research has occurred, which only strengthens the scientific basis of acupuncture. In addition to the basic science research, which we will be covering in modules 3 and 4 of this course, there were important clinical trials since the year 2000, and those we'll be covering in later modules. But for example, acupuncture for osteoarthritis, for low back pain, for migraines, and for chronic pain, and for high blood pressure were all seminal clinical trials during the early 2000s, which showed the effectiveness of acupuncture. In addition to the basic science research and randomized controlled trials that were being done to understand how effective acupuncture is for treating certain disease states, there was also qualitative research being done. One of the principal researchers in this area was the researcher Claire Cassidy, and she measured Chinese medical users' satisfaction. People seek acupuncture for a variety of reasons, including physical issues, mental health, and quality of life. Patients report that their care addressed much more than physical symptoms: more energy, better sleep, less fatigue, and more even emotional states. She said that qualitative data tell us why people do this or that. They reveal motivations and how decisions get made. To gather qualitative data, respondents are asked open-ended questions, such as, tell us the story of your experience with acupuncture care. There are no right answers, and in answering, each person chooses her own words, his own images. Then, despite all this freedom, if groups of stories still reveal shared themes, researchers can be sure that these themes are real components of respondents' experiences, not assumptions imposed from outside. Qualitative research is valuable because it shows what matters to people. Thus, it helps policy planners, school deans, teachers, and others to predict behavior and design for the future. That is researcher Claire Cassidy speaking. More recently, we had the development of the NADA protocols used in battlefield acupuncture and community acupuncture. The NADA protocol was accidentally discovered by a Hong Kong neurosurgeon, Dr. Wen, in the 1970s, who operated on a man with a concussion who also had a drug addiction. The doctor used acupuncture anesthesia, and during electrostimulation of the acupuncture needles, the patient reported complete disappearance of his withdrawal symptoms. The doctor went on to pursue more research and concluded that acupuncture could provide effective relief in heroin withdrawal syndrome using these points. They were codified into the National Acupuncture Detoxification Association, NADA, protocol, and the establishment of its training procedure, which was introduced at the Lincoln Recovery Center in the Bronx in New York in 1974. This 5-point protocol has been introduced into many Western clinical settings and is now used not only for drug withdrawal, pain reduction, and treatment of PTSD, but also as an overall behavioral health tool that serves all populations. It has been used as a part of employee health and wellness programs and work productivity and wellness initiatives because it is effective in reducing stress and pain and the effects of trauma. Battlefield acupuncture is a modification of the NADA protocol used by the military for the treatment of pain for soldiers on the battlefield. And community acupuncture is a way of treating a large group of people at one time using the NADA protocol and other points, which is a way to make acupuncture more accessible and affordable to different socioeconomic groups. We know that there are significant racial disparities in health and health care, and that they're driven by social and economic inequities, such as economic stability, neighborhood and physical environment, education, food, community safety and social context, and healthcare systems. And in fact, acupuncture can be an important tool to address some of these inequities. Liberation acupuncture is a philosophy and a movement that says a person's health and disease do not exist and cannot be addressed apart from social conditions. Some of the lessons that we have learned are that randomized controlled trials are not the best way to study acupuncture. In this tongue-in-cheek systematic review that was published in the British Medical Journal, titled Parachute Used to Prevent Death and Major Trauma Related to Gravitational Challenge, a systematic review of randomized controlled trials, found, in fact, that there were no randomized controlled trials to study this phenomenon because it was pretty obvious. And in fact, there are many, many things that are accepted in the world of medicine that have never been subjected to randomized controlled trials. And some of the problems in studying acupuncture with randomized controlled trials, you cannot blind the practitioner, and very often the patient, even if you use sham needles or sham points, patients will know or can know that they are being or not being treated. Acupuncture is expensive, and acupuncture randomized controlled trials are expensive to do, and there is no drug company that's going to pay for it when it comes to acupuncture. And we have seen that there's no such thing as sham acupuncture, that in fact stimulating points on the body through pressure uh, or even stimulating parts of the body that are not specific acupuncture points, in fact, does have a physiological effect. And so there is no such thing as sham acupuncture. Also, there's publication bias. It is difficult to get research published in the standard journals on acupuncture. They have, in fact, what's called a negative bias, where they oftentimes are more likely to publish negative articles on complementary medicine than positive articles. There's a political bias. The American Medical Association is not happy about having other modalities um, threatening their predominance. Um, and the fact that placebo is used as a pejorative term, but in fact, placebo effect is something that's positive. If we can use the environment to affect a person's response to acupuncture, well, I say more power to that. We're going to be exploring all of these challenges in our next module. So how do we capture the holistic nature of acupuncture? Well, one way is through pragmatic trials, and some are currently being undertaken to study how East Asian medicine is being used in the treatment of COVID-19 symptoms. This is happening extensively in Chinese hospitals and here in the United States. So these studies are looking at real world conditions and how acupuncture is used. There is another movement to study biofield therapies. Biofield therapies are those therapies that address life force. as opposed to disease states. And this diagram is taken from their healing report. They basically say that in order to enable systems change in healthcare with respect to biofield healing, we must involve all of these different areas: policy, education, practice, communication, research, and technology to advance our understanding of life force modalities. Then the hierarchies of evidence applied to lifestyle medicine is a way to approach the holistic nature of acupuncture and other complementary and integrative health systems. And we will be exploring all of this in later modules. Finally, the National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health's strategic plan for 2021 maps a pathway to research on whole person health. They are advancing research on the whole person and on the integration of complementary and conventional care. The plan also fosters research on health promotion and restoration, resilience, disease prevention, and symptom management. It enhances the complementary and integrative health research workforce and provides objective evidence-based information on complementary and integrative health interventions. Dr. Helene Langevin, NCCIAH director, says in that report, now more than ever, we need to look at the multiple factors that promote either health or disease and scientifically consider the whole person as a complex system in which health and disease are part of a bidirectional continuum. Our current biomedical research model is superb in advancing the diagnosis and pharmacological treatment of organ-specific diseases with growing precision. This knowledge is based on an increasingly sophisticated understanding of pathogenesis, or the mechanisms by which disease occurs. On the other hand, health restoration through self-care, lifestyle, or behavioral interventions is much less studied. And that is what we need to be focusing on. Finally, I would like to acknowledge the Society of Acupuncture Research for sponsoring the Special Interest Group on Education, and I'd like to acknowledge the contributors to this slideshow's development, including Dr. Ari Moret from Brazil for the original slideshow, which served as an inspiration for this presentation, Rosaline Ostrick from Yosan University, Lisa Ann Conboy from NISA, and Lorna Lee from the Wan Institute also contributed. And thank you so much for your listening.